Good morning, everyone. I think the majority of us are now here this morning. So I'd like to welcome you to our Meet the Funder event with our South Wiltshire Community Foundation, and we have Oliver Cripps from Herman Miller Cares Foundation. My name's Nicola Hillier, and I'm one of the grants officers here at Wiltshire Community Foundation, and I'm also joined by my colleague Karen Hobbs, who is also a grants officer, who I'll be handing over to later in the morning. I'm just going to run through some quick housekeeping before we start today. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Zoom by now, but just a few instructions before we start. We are recording the session today to aid with our note-taking and to share with those who are unable to join us this morning. So if you don't want to appear in the camera, just turn your camera off and your video. We'd ask you to mute your microphone throughout the presentations because we can get some feedback. If you haven't already done so, we would ask that you actually put your name on your screen, so you'd be able to do that in the top right hand corner of your picture. You'll have 3 dots, and if you click on that, you'll be able to rename as well. Please feel free to use the chat throughout the session, ask any questions and feedback, and we'll be sharing that as well. We'll also make sure that we email you copies of the slides after the event and the recording. So those who are familiar with Wiltshire Community Foundation, in normal times we would hold an annual conference, and we would hold that in Devizes at the Corn Exchange, but obviously we've been able to do this year, so we are now hosting a series of Meet the Funder webinars, and we have some national and local funders coming along to talk about their grant programmes, and we'll also be presenting on our grant priorities and current programmes that we have available. So now in a few moments I'll be handing over to Oliver Cripps, who will be giving information about Herman Miller Cares Foundation grant programmes. At the end of his session, we'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. Then I'll hand over to my colleague Karen Hobbs from Wiltshire Community Foundation, who will talk about our grant priorities and programmes. And we'll also share other sources of support and our future events that we're hosting. So yes, it's a great pleasure to then now hand over to Oliver.
Thanks very much, and thank you everyone for joining today. I will just set up my presentation, so hopefully you can see that come up now. Welcome, and I am Oliver Cripps. I work for Herman Miller. We're a furniture manufacturer based in Bower Hill near Wiltshire, and my day job is I work on sustainability, particularly related to our products. Around the factory, I'm known as the tree hugger, which is a badge of pride for me. And you can see a very great passion for the local natural environment. I've got a picture up behind me of West Woods near Marlborough, so I'm sure a lot of people will be familiar with the beautiful display of bluebells there. So today I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of Herman Miller and our grant programme, along with a few examples of projects we've supported recently in Europe. And then I'll provide a bit of technical information about the guidelines and what we can and cannot fund. I'm happy to take any questions after the presentation. So as I say, Herman Miller, we're known for probably our office furniture predominantly, but we manufacture a range of products to do with furniture. And we're also part of a group that contains a number of brands that you may or may not have heard of. We are born out of Michigan in the United States. But now we have global facilities and a global reach in terms of our products and customers. And as I say, here in the UK, our international division is based in Melksham. But we also have presence in a lot of different regions of the globe. There's a picture here of our production facility called Portal Mill, and you can see it's a hive of activity, and we were fortunate enough to move into a new location where we were able to design with sustainability in mind. And I'm pleased to say that you know, we've gone from strength to strength since. So being a good steward and a good member of the community is something that's in the DNA of Herman Miller, right back to the 1950s, when our founder, a guy called DJ Dupree, talked about being a steward of the environment. And more recently, our relatively new CEO, Andy Owen, has reinforced that commitment in terms of our values and also creating a force for good. Now, as a design-led company, our grant program really reflects that, and we try and align our giving to our values as a company, and our giving is managed through a corporate foundation based in the US called the Herman Miller Cares Foundation. And then regionally, we have various giving boards that have been set up to reflect local need and administer grants locally. And I'm a member of the European Giving Board, which is how I come to be here today. So one of the key things is that we think of Herman Miller as a community, both in terms of our employees, but also we have a dealer network that extends right the way across the world. We have also access through our customers and our supply chain to a huge range of other organizations. And really, we try and harness that to identify areas that we can support, and obviously to maximize the amount of good that we're able to do with our corporate giving. We have three key focus areas, which I'll talk about now. The first is about inspiring future designers, and we're very keen to engage particularly young people and underrepresented young people through our design process and through some of the expertise that we have both in-house and also through the community that I talked about. And we develop various programs that encourage young people to really, become the best they can be. Our second is about preserving planet Earth, and certainly this is a keen interest of mine. We engage both through our volunteering efforts and also through grant programs to help further our corporate sustainability goals and to really help the environments of the communities in which we operate. And the final area is about community, and particularly strengthening community. You can see here an example of some of the events that we support around the Pride movement, but also we're keen to reach out to vulnerable or underrepresented groups in those communities. Now, over the last 18 months or so, our focus really has been almost exclusively on our local response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll go through a couple of examples of how here in Europe we have risen to meet that challenge. Firstly, a number of our manufacturing sites got on board, particularly in the early days, manufacturing PPE for local hospitals and charities. To ensure that frontline workers were protected. And you can see here in the middle, this is my colleague Stefan, who, believe it or not, is not a full-time model, but this is him showing an example of the visor protectors that he was busy making in our factory. We've also recognised that communities worldwide and particularly local to our facilities have been under enormous pressure, and we have given support to a number of organisations, including the Trussell Trust locally, who provide a food bank. But we identified a wide range of projects locally that we were able to support through our COVID giving programme. And then beyond our support and response to COVID, here are a few examples of some projects that we've supported recently, local to us here in Europe. So the first is a charity called Motivation, who are based fairly close to us and actually have a global reach. And they actually design wheelchairs that are specific to the needs of people in developing nations, where maybe the infrastructure or the terrain is different. And we're very pleased to be partnering with Motivation, who I think just are a great organisation and do great work. And I think this is an example of where we try and use local connections to create a global reach. And I think that echoes us as a company in terms of how we approach our locations. The second project that we were involved in last year was the Friends of Westonbirt, who were creating a community shelter for use of the local community in terms of training opportunities and engagement. And we were fortunate, as the pandemic allowed, to actually send a volunteer team out to help them construct this community shelter. And also close to home, Kennet Furniture Refurbiz is based in Devizes and an organisation I've been involved in myself. And we supported a programme where they expanded their offering and opportunities for training people, young people and vulnerable people, to refurbish white goods, particularly, which were then supplied through local social providers to families in need. KFR have recently expanded their premises, and we continue to engage with them. And a really good example of how we're able to use our knowledge and expertise as a furniture maker to actually support a local charity that is able to reutilize and refurbish furniture items and supply those locally. And another key thing is about employee engagement. So we're very keen to support our employees in terms of their own fundraising passions. And you can see here just an example of some of the fundraising that our employees have done. And we're able to match that effort through the Herman Miller Cares programme to be able to maximise the giving to those causes that are dear to our employees. So you can see here example of colleagues from our Naught One brand based up in Yorkshire. Across to the right, some colleagues of mine who did a cycle across the country to raise money for fibromyalgia, which was something that impacted one of our colleagues. And I can't really stress enough that collaborative effort and that community engagement. We're really keen to engage with organisations on an ongoing basis, and also that organisations really sort of come to us via our colleagues as they're volunteering with them, or they have a particular passion for that area of work. So we really do prioritise grants where there are Herman Miller employees or members of our dealer community or our customers or suppliers are engaged with those organisations. We feel that the collaboration and the passion that people bring when they are engaged with organisations, makes for a much better result in terms of the projects we support. So I won't go into a huge amount of detail here, but we do have grant making criteria in that we support charities and we look for a clear alignment to our giving areas. As I've already said, the employee engagement is key, and we also look for collaboration across local organisations or to have a more national or global reach. One of the things is about the scalability. Obviously, we're keen on funding projects that will sustain themselves or that will lead to a much bigger change in the future. And while we do fund projects on an ongoing basis, we generally limit our funding to about 3 years. And we would ask that we're not the sole funder of an organisation or project. We do look for an element of match funding from the organisation or from other funders. As a global organisation, we certainly try and make an impact to as many causes as we can in the communities we operate. And obviously that has a bearing in terms of the size of grants that we're able to support. While we don't have any definitive guidance in terms of the size of grants, we would say that it needs to be appropriate to the organisation and also the impact that you're trying to have. And it's important to note that we only grant organisations that align with our values. And you can check our full giving guidelines in terms of what we can and cannot fund by visiting our website, or I'm happy to provide them to circulate after this presentation. So that's really it from me in terms of a quick overview of Herman Miller Cares. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm certainly happy to, as I say, provide those guidelines, provide any more information for the Community Foundation to circulate. But I'll hand back to Nicola, and perhaps if you want to coordinate if any questions are coming in.
Thanks, Oliver. Yes, so there's a couple of questions that have been posted in the chat, and then obviously I'll open up the floor to anyone else as well. So there's one question around whether you support new charities and what you're looking for in terms of their financials there.
Yeah, so again, I'd point people to our guidelines, which we do generally ask for financial statements to prove both the viability of the charity and also to try and ensure that we're not the sole funder or making up, too significant an amount of your funding. So if that's the case, do get in contact. I mean, the charitable status is the key thing, but we would ideally like to see the viability of an organisation before we invest funding with them.
Thank you, Oliver. And somebody's asked about, you mentioned in your presentation that you like to support charities that your colleagues are obviously supporting themselves. Is there a way for charities to find out who you support? So,
I mean, we wouldn't be able to provide details of our employees to charities, but certainly if charities have opportunities for our employees to engage either through volunteering or fundraising, then we're happy to circulate those internally. We have various internal mechanisms to highlight those opportunities to colleagues, and that might be a way to seek engagement with our employees. In terms of finding out if any of our employees are already engaged with your organisation, I'm afraid we wouldn't have any mechanism to do that.
Thank you. And somebody just posted another question centering around, would you fund a charity that was in the process of registering, so they're not yet registered with the Charity Commission?
I think, you know, we'd be happy to hear from you if you have a proposal, but you know, the charitable status is one of the key requirements of our funding. So it might be worth waiting until you're, you know, fully set up, you know, and you've got a really clear idea about what support you need.
Thank you. There's a few questions popping up in the chat here. So would you fund larger charities who provide services locally?
Yeah, certainly. So the example that I gave of the Trussell Trust is a national charity which have local food banks, and we were able to partner with them in terms of their local provision. Obviously, we do want to positively impact on the communities in which we operate. So you know, we do look for opportunities to help communities close to either where we have facilities, where we may have dealers, for example, where we might have even suppliers or customers. So, you know, the sphere of interest is fairly broad, and obviously it's a balance between, you know, making that funding go further in terms of the local solution, but also you know, being able to support those national causes and really help there as well.
Thank you. And there's a couple of questions centering on the volunteering aspect of your work. So how would people find out about who to contact about the volunteering with Herman Miller?
So if you wanted to send any opportunities into our info@Herman Miller address, and again I can circulate that, then it will be directed to the right people, or you can send in opportunities, and as I say, we can list those on our internal platforms to be able to highlight them to everyone internally.
Is there a geographical restriction? Can people travel across county to Swindon, Wiltshire?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, our employees, you know, come from a fairly, you know, wide area, but also, you know, we have locations in London, we have dealers across the country. So really, as I say, it's about, you know, connecting with people who are either work for Herman Miller or associated with the Herman Miller community that have an interest and a passion for whatever you do.
And do community interest companies qualify for your grant criteria?
Yeah, I understand they do. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So somebody's asked about whether Herman Miller would provide furniture rather than a grant.
We have done in the past, and often the way that we actually do that is that we provide a grant that can then be used to purchase items from anywhere, including sort of heavily discounted items from ourselves. So not sure about the ins and outs of why we do it that way, but that seems to have been the most successful method for providing furniture items.
Lovely. I think we've covered the questions all in chat. I don't want to open up the floor if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask anything that's been missed at all. No? Okay, then I'll hand over to my colleague Karen Hobbs, who's one of the grants officers here at Wiltshire Community Foundation, to explain about our grant programmes.
Lovely, thank you very much, Nicola. Can you just bear with me while I get some slides up? That will be, sorry. There it is, sorry. There we go. Okay, thank you. Now, normally when I get to this bit, we've done several of these Meet the Funder events, I would say to you, if you've heard me speak before, feel free to sort of switch off and do something else for the moment. But I would encourage you to listen for a little bit longer, because we have a few changes that we wanted to let you know about today. So just for anybody who's not completely familiar with the foundation, this first slide just explains a little bit about the range of work that we do in the communities in Wiltshire. So we do offer grants to groups, that's a very front-facing thing, and we do have some individual grant programmes which Nicola very adeptly looks after, mainly sort of around education and fuel poverty. We do offer some information and advice for groups and sort of networking like we're doing today. But we do also work with donors and support them to give to their community. That could be sort of corporate donors, trusts, individuals, people just wanting to give small amounts regularly, for example. And we do work around exploring the needs in our community as well. So we have people that are sort of doing research and helping us to understand what's going on in Wiltshire and in the various communities around the county. This slide will just talk about the types of organisations we fund, but it's probably worth me saying at this point that those of you who've sort of received funding from us historically will be familiar with our sort of pre-COVID rolling programme of what we called the foundation grants, which were £5,000 a year for up to 3 years as a maximum, and our small grant programme, which was £2,000 a year for up to 2 years. And they would roll throughout the year, and we would sort of make decisions quarterly on those. During COVID, if anybody's had funding during COVID, you'd have become familiar with our coronavirus fund, where we've tried to sort of be a bit more flexible, make decisions more quickly. We've sort of taken away a few of the restrictions around the size of the grant, etc. So we've had a much more sort of fluid programme going on to try and support all the activity around the county. We, like all charities, are having to take a bit of a pause and understand what we need to do going forward as the world changes a little bit. So I just need to let you know that we have closed our current coronavirus fund, but don't worry, we'll be opening again sort of in the second part of June, and we will have a community grants programme which will be similar to what you have had before. We may refresh some of the wording, but the slides I'm going to go through now will just give you the overview of you know, the sort of general approach that we will be taking. But please do come back and have a look at the website for more detailed information when it's available in June. So don't worry, we'll still be doing grants, but we're just having to revert to something a bit more typical rather than the coronavirus response. So we will continue to fund, and our priority, which is why it's in bold here, will be small grassroots voluntary organisations who are working to improve the lives of those who are most in need in Wiltshire. And they will need to be groups that have a constitution. So either as a voluntary group or community organisation, it will include registered charities and not-for-profit companies or community interest companies, but our stipulation is the majority of directors have to receive no payment from the company. So it has to be a company that is basically running like a charity. We can fund branches of national organisations, but only if they have a local management committee and structure within Wiltshire or Swindon, their own constitution and a bank account that they control. You'll still be able to apply for grants that cover core costs, project costs and capital costs, but as ever, our capital costs will be up to a maximum of one grant of £5,000 for a project. Again, this remains the same. We won't be funding schools or statutory bodies such as city councils, parish councils. We have done that during COVID for COVID related work, but not for general community work. Money, we can't fund money to individuals or families other than our specified individual programmes. One-off or sponsored events, projects which duplicate an existing service, and this is where we find the networking really, really important, because we need to make sure that groups understand what else is happening in the areas that they're operating in, to make sure that they're complementing what other groups are doing and not duplicating work. We can't fund the advancement of religion, although we can fund Christian organisations to do general community work. We can't fund medical research and equipment, animal welfare or political activities. So those things will remain the same, but as like I say, do come back to our website to have a look at the detail of how we will be grant making from June onwards. We do have a couple of other programmes running at the moment which you may be interested in. One is called Made by Sport, #Clubs in Crisis. So this is a funder that have approached the network of community foundations around the country, and they wish to make grants to sports clubs or organisations delivering sport or other physical activities for young people aged between 5 and 25. So if you have a project that's specifically working in that age group and using sport in a way to you know, support or engage or develop young people, then you may be interested in finding out a bit more via our website about that, with grants of up to £2,021, which they've chosen obviously for obvious reasons because it matches the year. We're also, on behalf of Wessex Water, running an environment fund for them. So these again focused at small groups. So grants are up to £1,500. It's only for groups in the Wessex Water area, so that's most of Wiltshire, but it doesn't include Swindon and some surrounding areas, so just to be aware of that if you're Swindon based. The projects need to be focused on these priorities, so they need to be involving communities, environmental activities that benefit the local area, that they have a positive impact on the local environment, or that they are sharing learning about the local environment. So you have to meet one or more of those. And then the actual priorities for the fund are around conservation of water use, reduction of single-use plastic, reducing waste, and improving local biodiversity. So again, you don't have to be an environmental organisation or charity, but if you are wanting to plan some work around the environment, then you know, this grant may be interesting for you to consider making an application. So again, both of those you can find out more information on our website. And then just quickly, it's just to sort of refresh some of the things that we're looking for in grant applications, just if you want to sort of improve your grant application practice. We tend to want something that is very clearly explained. So, you know, sometimes it's not always easy to work out exactly what a group is doing. So if you can think to yourself, I need to show what we're doing, who we're doing it for, when we do it, where we do it, why we do it, and how we do it. And if you can make sure that it covers those things. Obviously, if you can use plain language and avoid jargon or long explanations, it's much better to have something that's succinct, gets across the message. If you can use evidence, you've done surveys to the people that use your services, or you've got some statistics or feedback or case studies, can be really helpful to bring alive your application. Really, really helpful. Get across the need that you're meeting. Telling us how you know the need exists in the first place. I mean, obviously that links to the point above, but it's really important that we understand that you know and that you've engaged with the people that you actually want to support about the needs that they have. Understanding how it will then make a difference to the lives of those people that are benefiting. So again, evidence from people that have been supported is really helpful there. Will people be benefiting, make a contribution? And just be clear, if it's not possible, then just briefly explain why. That's really, really helpful. How will you measure the success of your project? You know, what measures are you going to put in place to get feedback, measure the numbers of people coming through, measure the difference that it's made to people, or collect data and evidence about that? How are you going to do that? Being really clear in the budget section about what the actual total cost is, so that we can see where the grant from the Community Foundation will fit in with that, and how you're going to fund the rest of your project. Provide the cost breakdown clearly in the budget section. And then obviously, as I've just said, how any shortfall will be funded. So that's just a few tips from our point of view as to what helps us with an application and helps us to assess an application. I think that is everything from me. So are there any specific questions about how we're doing things forward?
Don't think there isn't any questions in the chat, so I don't know. Happy to open up the floor, and if people want to raise their hand and ask any questions about the Foundation's grant programmes, our priorities, or how the application process works. Oh, thanks, Gary. No, I don't think anyone's got any questions at the moment. As I said earlier, we will be making these slides available after the event. We'll email them across to you as well. Before I move on to the next part, I'd just like to open the floor up to Jackie Orchard, who'd posted a message in our chat. She's a trustee to, I think on here, the YAP Charitable Trust.
That's it.
Yeah, and they have some grant programmes, so she just can give you a good...
Right, okay. I'll just tell you quickly what the YAP Trust does. It's a national grant maker, but we're quite unusual in that we will only fund those with an income of under £40,000, and we will only fund core costs. We won't fund new things at all. Our grant making is quite broad. We give funding up to £3,000 a year for 3 years. Each 3-year batch is considered independent, so you could apply again at the end of the grant period, and if you meet all the criteria, then you've got a chance of another 3 years lot of funding. So it's actually we have some quite longer term relationships with charities in that way. We fund projects for elderly people, children and young people aged 5 to 25, people with physical impairments, learning difficulties or mental health challenges, social welfare projects, which are, that's quite a broad thing, and educational and learning projects, and that would be for people that are educationally disadvantaged, adults or children. So our grant making is really broad, and the fact it's for core funds as well, I think is quite unusual. And we get very few applications from Wiltshire. In fact, I can't remember the last one we've had from Wiltshire. So it'd be really nice to see a few, particularly as I live here. So please give us a go. And that's it really.
Thank you, Jackie. We'll be sure to share the link along with the slides that you've given us. So
Paul just put his hand up.
Yeah. Sorry, Jackie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm a trustee of Heels charity based in Malmesbury.
Okay.
Did apply to you on behalf of Heels about a year ago for a 3-year grant. I hadn't realised that your income ceiling is that 40,000? Did you say?
It is 40,000. Yes.
I don't know about other colleagues at this meeting, but one of the issues for us is about sustainability, and that means about meeting the costs of the two sort of semi part-time members of staff that actually do an awful lot of work for us. In this COVID period, what I've discovered is that people like Wiltshire Community and the Rousing Foundation and the National Lottery have all been very generous in terms of wanting to get money out, and I've been fortunate to secure grants from those people, which neatly pushes up this year pushes over the £40,000 mark. But in terms of sustainability, we talk about long COVID. I'm absolutely convinced that the COVID pandemic is going to have a long-term implication for charities like ourselves, and possibly charities represented here at this meeting. Yeah. So the needs aren't going to go away, but some of the funding sources might be less generous or less available to us. So I want to make, on behalf of Heels of Malmesbury, which is a general charity doing everything from providing Meals on Wheels to advocacy for people struggling with housing benefits and so forth. But at the moment, if I were to present our financial statements, we would just have crept over the £40,000 mark.
It is a conversation that we plan to have in our November strategy meeting, because it is recognised that the COVID funding has pushed many organisations, and when you're looking for the following year, you would have spent that money, but your expenses, but you're working on historical accounts, aren't you? So that is a conversation that we're already having as a group.
So would you suggest?
Trustee.
Would you suggest that we wait until you've had that conversation before we submit an application?
I think what you would have to, what I would suggest you do is put your argument, explain your situation, put your case forward, and what you would need to do is submit your accounts, but also submit your projections and submit your statement for where you are. So it depends where you are in your financial cycle. Yeah. If at that point, you've gone over your financial year, and then you say you've gone 2 or 3 months over your financial year, and it's very clear that you're under that limit, in terms you're going to be under that limit, then you've got a really good argument that you could present to our administrator. So yes.
Thank you for that.
There are conversations that are happening around that. We do recognise it is tough, and I would say as well that for our existing grant funders, we did give additional funding to during the COVID period.
Brilliant.
Significant. We withdrew money from our endowments to do that, to give more than our thing, and so it is worth sort of hanging in there, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Many thanks, Jackie and Paul. Okay. Was there any other questions centering around the Foundation's grant programmes at all? I don't think there is. But if you do think of anything at a later date, we are contactable by email and telephone, so please do give us a call at any point. If I just move on to the next bit. So I wanted just to make you aware that other sources of support that is available. So on our website, we do have a dedicated page listing funding opportunities that are available to charities, both from local and national funders. And there is a free searchable database that you can use, and you can either search by geography or the type of work that you are undertaking or the grants that you are looking for. We are working both with Community First, Voluntary Action Swindon and Wessex Community Action to put together a series of events and meetings throughout the year. And also I'd always direct you to the NCVO website, which has some great tools and policies that you can use as well through there. Our future events. So we do hold monthly one-to-one advice sections, which are bookable, and you can have an hour-long conversation with one of the members of the grants team to discuss either funding opportunities that you're looking for or any governance advice. Our next 2 Meet the Funder events are taking place. There's one in June, and we have St James's Place Foundation talking about their grant programmes, and in July, Garfield Weston Foundation. And I'm just at the moment in the process of talking to Children in Need to get them set up to come along and talk about their grant programmes, which will be opening in the autumn. We are holding a series of workshops as well. The next one's taking place next week, and there are still places, so if you're interested, please do book on. They are free, and the next one is our funding strategy workshop. And then in July we have one about using data to demonstrate your charity's impact. And we have some network meeting events taking place as well, one in June specifically for groups that are working in Swindon, and one in July for people that are working in Wiltshire, to connect you locally with other groups as well. So that is the end of our presentation for today. I hope you've found it an informative event. As I said, we will make the slides available and we will email them across to you.